In the heart of Manhattan's financial district, where million-dollar deals are made with handshakes and careers can crumble with a single wrong decision, nobody pays attention to the quiet man who empties their trash cans each night. They see the uniform, the cleaning cart, the humble nod as he works around their important meetings. What they don't see is the mind behind those patient eyes, a mind that holds the blueprint to save their failing company. This is the story of Marcus Williams, a man whose true identity was hidden behind a janitor's uniform, and the day he transformed from invisible to indispensable. It's about the assumptions we make, the talent we overlook, and the moment when genius refuses to stay silent any longer. Sometimes the person you're looking for has been right in front of you all along, quietly watching, quietly knowing, quietly waiting for the moment when the truth finally demands to be heard. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Pinnacle Financial Tower. At 52, he had perfected the art of invisibility. His grey uniform was pressed but worn, his movements efficient but unhurried. To the executives hurrying past him toward their corner offices, he was just part of the building's infrastructure. As unremarkable as the elevator music or the potted plants, Marcus had been cleaning these same floors for 8 years, arriving each evening at 6 o'clock sharp as the business day wound down. He knew the building's rhythms better than anyone. He knew that Mr. Thompson in accounting stayed late every Tuesday to balance the quarterly reports. He knew that Sarah from marketing always forgot to log off her computer, leaving sensitive client information glowing on her screen. He knew that the CEO, Richard Blackstone, paced his office like a caged lion when the pressure mounted, talking to himself in rapid, anxious bursts. What none of them knew was that Marcus Williams held 3 degrees in architecture and urban planning from Columbia University. They didn't know that he had once designed shopping centers and office complexes across the East Coast. They didn't know that a devastating economic downturn 15 years earlier had wiped out his firm, his savings, and his reputation in the span of 6 months. They saw only what they expected to see, a middle-aged black man with a mop and a bucket. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He cleaned the very type of buildings he used to create. Every night, as he wiped down conference room tables and emptied wastebaskets, he observed the architectural details with a professional eye. He noticed the poor traffic flow that created bottlenecks during busy periods. He saw how the lighting design failed to maximize natural illumination, driving up electricity costs. He understood the inefficient use of space that left some areas cramped while others remained perpetually empty. But Marcus kept his observations to himself. He had learned that speaking up only led to uncomfortable questions and unwanted attention. Better to remain invisible, to do his job well, and to save his architectural insights for the sketches he drew in his small apartment each night. The Pinnacle Financial Building was Richard Blackstone's pride and joy, a 40-story monument to his success. Blackstone had built his investment firm from nothing, starting with a borrowed $10,000 and a fierce determination to prove himself in the cutthroat world of finance. Now, 30 years later, Pinnacle Financial managed over $2 billion in assets and employed nearly 300 people. But success had made Blackstone restless. He wanted more than just financial growth. He wanted to leave a lasting mark on the city's skyline. For the past 2 years, he had been planning Pinnacle Financial's next phase, a new headquarters that would dwarf the current building and establish the company as a true titan of industry. The project was to be his legacy, a gleaming testament to his vision and ambition. The problem was that every architectural firm he consulted seemed to miss the mark. They presented designs that were either too conventional or too avant-garde, too expensive or too modest. Some focused on aesthetic beauty while ignoring practical functionality. Others prioritized cost-effectiveness but delivered uninspiring boxes of glass and steel. After 2 years and countless presentations, Blackstone was growing frustrated with the lack of vision he encountered. Marcus witnessed these frustrations firsthand during his evening cleaning rounds. He had emptied the trash cans after dozens of architectural presentations, collecting crumpled sketches and discarded proposals. Sometimes he found Blackstone alone in his office at midnight, staring at building models and floor plans with obvious dissatisfaction. The CEO's stress was evident in his increasingly short temper with staff and his habit of working longer hours while accomplishing less. One evening in early November, Marcus was cleaning the main conference room when he discovered a collection of blueprints spread across the large mahogany table. The plan showed the proposed new headquarters, a generic tower that looked like a dozen other buildings already dotting the Manhattan landscape. Marcus paused in his work, studying the drawings with professional interest. The design was competent but uninspired. The architect had prioritized maximum square footage over optimal functionality. The floor plan would create inefficient workflows, with employees walking excessive distances between departments that needed to collaborate regularly. The building's orientation ignored the path of the sun, missing opportunities for natural lighting that would reduce energy costs and improve the work environment. The ground floor design failed to take advantage of the site's unique corner location, which could have been used to create an impressive public space that would enhance the company's prestige. Marcus found himself mentally redesigning the building, imagining how he would approach the challenge differently. He would rotate the structure 15 degrees to capture better natural light. He would create an open atrium that would serve as the building's heart, improving both traffic flow and company culture. He would use the corner location to create a dramatic entrance that would make a statement about Pinnacle Financial's confidence and vision. For 20 minutes, Marcus stood transfixed by the possibilities he saw in the flawed plans. Then he remembered himself, quickly finished cleaning the room, and moved on to his next task. But the building design stayed with him for the rest of the night, and when he reached his apartment at 2 a.m, he couldn't resist sketching out some of his ideas. What started as a quick sketch evolved into a comprehensive redesign. Marcus worked until dawn, drawing elevation views, floor plans, and detail studies. He calculated cost implications, analyzed structural requirements, and designed systems for maximum efficiency. By morning, he had created a complete alternative proposal that addressed every weakness he had identified in the original design. Looking at his work in the grey dawn light, Marcus felt a familiar mixture of pride and melancholy. His design was elegant, functional, and innovative. It would create a building that was not only beautiful, but also highly efficient and perfectly suited to Pinnacle Financial's needs. But who would listen to a janitor's architectural ideas? Who would take seriously the suggestions of a man they barely noticed as he cleaned around them? Marcus carefully rolled up his drawings and placed them in a tube, adding them to the collection of theoretical projects that filled his apartment. Like all the others, this design would remain his secret, a might-have-been that would never see the light of day. He showered, changed clothes, and prepared for sleep, trying to push the building design out of his mind. In a few hours, he would return to Pinnacle Financial for another shift of invisible labor, mopping floors and emptying trash, while the people around him made decisions about projects he could improve but would never be asked to touch. The next evening, Marcus arrived at work to find the building buzzing with unusual activity. Even at 6 o'clock, most of the offices were still occupied, and he could hear raised voices coming from the executive floor. Security guards were posted at the elevator banks, checking identification badges more carefully than usual. Something significant was happening, though Marcus had no idea what it might be. As he began his cleaning routine, fragments of conversation reached him from open office doors. He heard mentions of deadlines, presentations, and high-stakes meetings. The architectural plans he had studied the previous night were gone from the conference room, replaced by financial documents and legal papers. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the kind of nervous energy that accompanies make-or-break moments in business. Marcus worked methodically through the building, noting the stress evident in the staff members who remained at their desks well past normal hours. Coffee cups accumulated faster than usual, wastebaskets filled with crumpled papers and discarded drafts. Whatever was happening at Pinnacle Financial, it was pushing everyone to their limits. Near midnight, as Marcus was cleaning the executive floor, he heard shouting coming from Richard Blackstone's corner office. The CEO's voice carried through the heavy wooden door, angry and frustrated. Marcus couldn't make out specific words, but the tone was unmistakably one of crisis and mounting pressure. When the shouting stopped, replaced by an ominous silence, Marcus quietly went about his work, careful not to draw attention to himself. He had witnessed enough corporate dramas over the years to know that staying invisible was the safest course. Whatever problems Pinnacle Financial was facing, they were far above his pay grade and beyond his ability to influence. But as he cleaned the conference rooms and executive offices that night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching a critical moment unfold. The building's usual rhythms were disrupted, replaced by an atmosphere of crisis and urgent decision-making. Change was coming to Pinnacle Financial, though Marcus had no way of knowing how dramatically that change would affect his own carefully invisible existence. The building felt different as he finished his shift in the early morning hours. The familiar space seemed charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Marcus had no idea that within 48 hours, his quiet life of observation and anonymity would be shattered forever, and that the architectural drawings he had sketched in secret would become the key to his dramatic transformation from invisible janitor to indispensable visionary. The next morning brought news that would shake Pinnacle Financial to its core. Richard Blackstone sat in his leather chair at 7 a.m., staring at the newspaper headline that spelled potential disaster for his company. Major investor pulls out of Pinnacle Financial Tower project. Questions raised about architectural vision. The article detailed how Harrison Capital, Pinnacle Financial's primary investor for the new headquarters project, had withdrawn their $200 million commitment after reviewing the latest architectural proposals. The investor group cited concerns about the building's design, questioning whether it would provide adequate return on investment or enhance the company's market position. Without Harrison Capital's backing, the entire project was in jeopardy. But the bad news didn't stop there. The article went on to reveal that two other major clients had expressed concerns about Pinnacle Financial's strategic direction. Questions were being raised about the company's leadership and vision for the future. Stock prices had already begun to slide in pre-market trading, and industry analysts were scheduling emergency meetings to reassess their recommendations. Blackstone's phone began ringing at 7:15. First his board of directors, then major clients, then financial journalists seeking comments on the developing story. Each conversation was more difficult than the last, as Blackstone found himself defending decisions he was no longer certain were correct. The architectural vision that had seemed so promising just weeks ago now appeared to be the anchor that might drag his entire company beneath the waves. By 9 a.m., an emergency board meeting had been called. The conference room filled with stern-faced executives, each carrying copies of the damaging newspaper article. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Blackstone took his place at the head of the massive mahogany table, the same table where Marcus had studied the architectural plans just 2 nights earlier. "Richard, we need explanations," demanded Margaret Chen, the board's lead independent director. "How did we get to a point where our major investor questions our fundamental vision? What exactly went wrong with this project?" Blackstone had been asking himself the same questions all morning. For 2 years, he had worked with some of the most respected architectural firms in the country. He had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in design studies, environmental assessments, and market research. Yet somehow, despite all that effort and expense, he had failed to produce a vision that inspired confidence in his investors. "The architectural firms we've worked with are all highly credentialed," Blackstone replied, his voice strained from hours of difficult phone calls. Henderson Associates designed 3 of the most celebrated commercial buildings in Manhattan over the past decade. Kovac and Partners have won multiple international awards for their innovative use of sustainable materials. "We're not dealing with amateurs here." "Then why," interrupted board member James Patterson, "do we keep getting designs that look like every other building in the financial district? Where's the innovation? Where's the vision that's supposed to justify a $300 million investment?" The question stung because Blackstone had been wondering the same things. Each architectural presentation had left him feeling vaguely dissatisfied, though he couldn't articulate exactly what was missing. The designs were professionally executed and technically sound, but they lacked the spark of inspiration that would set Pinnacle Financial apart from its competitors. "I think we need to consider the possibility that this project is fundamentally flawed," suggested board member Rebecca Martinez. "Maybe we're trying to solve the wrong problem. Maybe what we need isn't a new building, but a new business strategy." The suggestion hung in the air like an accusation. Blackstone had built his career on bold moves and calculated risks. The new headquarters project represented his vision for Pinnacle Financial's future, a physical manifestation of his ambitions for the company. To abandon the project now would be to admit that his judgment had been catastrophically wrong. "I refuse to believe that's the case," Blackstone said firmly. "There's a right answer here. There's a design that will work, that will inspire investor confidence and position us for the next phase of growth. We just haven't found it yet." "Richard, with respect, we've been looking for 2 years," Chen replied. "How many more architectural firms can we consult? How much more time and money can we invest in a project that seems to be driving investors away rather than attracting them?" The meeting continued for 3 hours, growing more contentious as positions hardened. Some board members pushed for immediate abandonment of the headquarters project, while others supported giving Blackstone more time to find a solution. No clear consensus emerged, but the message was unmistakable. Blackstone had a limited window to turn things around before the board would be forced to act. As the board members filed out of the conference room, Blackstone remained seated, staring out at the Manhattan skyline that had inspired his architectural ambitions. Somewhere in this city was an architect who could capture his vision and create the building that would secure Pinnacle Financial's future. But after 2 years of searching, he was beginning to wonder if that person existed. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams was arriving at the building for another evening shift, unaware of the corporate drama that had unfolded above his head all day. The security guard seemed more alert than usual, and he noticed that many offices were still occupied despite the late hour. The building's nervous energy was even more pronounced than it had been the previous night. As Marcus began his cleaning routine, he gradually pieced together fragments of the day's events, from overheard conversations and discarded documents. The headquarters project was in trouble. The architectural vision was being questioned. Jobs might be at risk if the company couldn't stabilize its position with investors and clients. In some ways, the news didn't surprise Marcus. He had seen the architectural proposals that had failed to impress, and he understood why investors might question their potential. But knowing that he might have solutions to offer, while being powerless to suggest them, created a frustration that grew stronger with each passing hour. Around 10 p.m., Marcus was cleaning near Blackstone's office when he heard the CEO on a conference call with what sounded like another architectural firm. Through the partially open door, he could hear Blackstone's increasingly desperate tone as he described his vision for a building that would make a statement and inspire confidence while remaining functional and cost-effective. The conversation lasted an hour, ending with what was clearly another disappointment. Marcus heard Blackstone slam down the phone, followed by a string of frustrated curses. For several minutes, the office was silent, except for the sound of papers being shuffled and occasionally crumpled. When Blackstone finally emerged from his office, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his typically perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He walked past Marcus without acknowledgement, heading for the elevator with the slow, heavy steps of someone facing an impossible situation. Marcus watched him go, feeling an unexpected surge of sympathy for the man whose building he cleaned each night. For all their differences in position and background, Marcus recognized the particular frustration of having a clear vision but being unable to find the right people to help realize it. He had experienced that same feeling many times during his own architectural career, though never with stakes this high. That night, Marcus worked with unusual intensity, his mind churning with possibilities. The architectural drawings he had sketched the previous evening seemed to call to him from his apartment, offering solutions to problems that were tearing apart the company around him. But the gulf between his position as a janitor and his potential as an architect seemed impossibly wide. As he cleaned the executive conference room, Marcus found himself studying the space with new eyes. This was where decisions were made that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. This was where Blackstone would soon have to face his board of directors with either a solution or an admission of failure. The room's formal atmosphere and intimidating scale were designed to reinforce hierarchies and maintain boundaries between those who made decisions and those who implemented them. For the first time in 8 years, Marcus allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to sit at that mahogany table as an equal, to present his architectural vision to people who had the power to make it reality. The fantasy was both thrilling and terrifying, a glimpse of a life that seemed as distant as the moon. Near midnight, as he was emptying trash cans on the executive floor, Marcus discovered something that made his heart race. In Blackstone's wastebasket was a crumpled memo addressed to the board of directors, outlining a timeline for finding new architectural consultation. According to the document, Blackstone had exactly 1 week to present a compelling new vision for the headquarters project. After that, the board would vote on whether to cancel the project entirely. 1 week. 7 days to find the inspiration that had eluded the best architectural firms in the city. Marcus stared at the memo, feeling the weight of the deadline that hung over everyone in the building. In 7 days, decisions would be made that could affect the careers and livelihoods of hundreds of people. As he finished his shift in the early morning hours, Marcus carried that timeline with him like a ticking clock. He had architectural solutions that could save the project and potentially transform Pinnacle Financial's future. But he was still just a janitor with a mop and a bucket, invisible to the people who desperately needed his expertise. The irony was almost unbearable. The answer to Blackstone's problems was pushing a cleaning cart through his building every night, but the social and professional barriers between them seemed insurmountable. Marcus had spent 8 years perfecting his invisibility, but now that very invisibility was preventing him from helping when it mattered most. Walking home through the pre-dawn streets of Manhattan, Marcus felt the city's energy pulsing around him. This was a place where dreams came true and fortunes were made, where vision and determination could overcome any obstacle. But it was also a place where assumptions and prejudices could blind people to the solutions right in front of them. In less than 18 hours, he would return to Pinnacle Financial for another shift of cleaning and observing. The countdown to Blackstone's deadline would continue, bringing the company closer to a moment of truth that could change everything. Marcus had no idea that circumstances were about to force him out of the shadows and into the most important presentation of his life. 3 days after the board meeting ultimatum, the crisis at Pinnacle Financial deepened. What had begun as investor concerns about architectural vision had escalated into a broader questioning of the company's leadership and strategic direction. 2 more clients had requested meetings to review their investment portfolios, and industry rumors suggested that a hostile takeover attempt might be in the works. Richard Blackstone arrived at his office each morning to find his assistant's desk covered with urgent messages from journalists, analysts, and concerned clients. The financial press was following the story closely, with daily articles speculating about Pinnacle Financial's future. Stock prices continued their downward slide, and employee morale was reaching dangerous lows as layoff rumors spread through the building. On Thursday morning, Blackstone convened another emergency meeting with his senior leadership team. The group gathered in the main conference room, their faces reflecting the stress of the past week. Chief Financial Officer David Kim spread financial projections across the table, each scenario more sobering than the last. "If we cancel the headquarters project now," Kim explained, "we'll take a $12 million loss on design fees, site preparation, and legal costs. But if we continue without investor support, we're looking at potential bankruptcy. We need a miracle, Richard. We need something that will restore confidence and prove that this company still has a vision worth backing." Marketing Director Sarah Chen added her own concerns about reputation management. "The narrative in the business press is becoming fixed," she said. "We're being portrayed as a company that's lost its way, that's trying to build monuments to ego instead of focusing on client service. Every day we go without a solution, that narrative gets stronger and harder to change." Human Resources Director Michael Torres raised the specter of employee defections. "Our top performers are getting calls from headhunters," he warned. "If people start believing the company is in serious trouble, we could lose our best talent just when we need them most. Confidence is everything in this business, and right now, confidence is in short supply." Blackstone listened to each report with growing frustration. He had built Pinnacle Financial through 30 years of careful planning and calculated risks. Now, a single project threatened to unravel everything he had worked to create. The architectural vision that was supposed to secure his legacy was instead becoming the catalyst for his downfall. "I've contacted every major architectural firm on the East Coast," Blackstone said, his voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "Some won't return my calls because they don't want to be associated with a failing project. Others want ridiculous fees to take on what they see as a rescue mission. And none of them seem to understand what I'm trying to achieve." The room fell silent as the magnitude of their situation settled over the group. They were successful professionals who had built their careers on finding solutions to complex problems. But this challenge seemed to defy every conventional approach they could devise. "Maybe," suggested Kim hesitantly, "we need to think outside conventional channels. Maybe the solution isn't going to come from the usual suspects." "What do you mean?" Blackstone asked. "I don't know exactly," Kim admitted, "but we've exhausted all the obvious options. Maybe we need to consider possibilities we haven't thought of before." The suggestion was vague, but it resonated with everyone in the room. They had indeed exhausted conventional approaches. If salvation existed, it would have to come from an unexpected direction. As the meeting ended without resolution, Blackstone retreated to his office to wrestle with impossible choices. Through his window, he could see the construction site where Pinnacle Financial's new headquarters was supposed to rise. The lot sat empty except for survey equipment and a trailer that housed the project management team. The site mocked him with its promise of what might have been. That evening, Marcus arrived for his shift to find the building's atmosphere more charged than ever. Security had been increased, and several floors showed signs of late-night meetings and urgent phone calls. The cleaning staff whispered among themselves about possible layoffs and corporate restructuring. Everyone seemed to sense that momentous changes were coming. As Marcus worked his way through the building, he noticed details that revealed the mounting pressure on Pinnacle Financial's employees. Trash cans overflowed with energy drink containers and takeout containers, evidence of people working around the clock. Whiteboards in conference rooms were covered with financial projections and strategic diagrams, all showing variations of dire scenarios. Near 10 p.m., Marcus was cleaning outside Blackstone's office when he overheard a phone conversation that made him pause. The CEO was speaking with his wife, his voice breaking with exhaustion and worry. "I don't know what else to do, Helen," Blackstone was saying. "I've tried everything I can think of. Maybe the board is right. Maybe I need to admit that this project was a mistake from the beginning. Maybe it's time to step aside and let someone else clean up the mess I've made." The defeat in Blackstone's voice was unmistakable. This was not the confident executive who had built a financial empire, but a man facing the possible collapse of everything he had worked to achieve. Marcus had never heard such vulnerability from someone in power, and it stirred something deep within him. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Blackstone describing the impossible situation he faced. No architectural firm seemed capable of creating the vision he needed. No investor was willing to back a project that had already generated so much negative publicity. No timeline existed that would allow for the kind of comprehensive redesign that might save the situation. When the call ended, Marcus heard Blackstone's chair creak as the CEO slumped back in defeat. For several minutes, the office was quiet, except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Then came the sound of papers rustling, followed by what sounded like someone weeping quietly. Marcus stood frozen outside the office door, torn between his instinct for invisibility and a growing conviction that he couldn't remain silent any longer. In his apartment were architectural drawings that could solve every problem Blackstone faced. The design he had created would inspire investor confidence, enhance the company's prestige, and provide the functional efficiency needed for long-term success. But revealing his architectural expertise would mean abandoning the carefully constructed invisibility that had protected him for 8 years. It would mean exposing himself to questions about his background, his qualifications, and his reasons for working as a janitor despite his professional training. It would mean risking everything for the chance to help people who had never even noticed his existence. As Marcus wrestled with these thoughts, he heard Blackstone's phone ring again. This time, the conversation was clearly a business call, with the CEO trying to project confidence while discussing contingency plans with what sounded like a crisis management consultant. The contrast between Blackstone's public composure and his private despair was stark and heartbreaking. When that call ended, Blackstone emerged from his office, looking like he had aged years in the past week. He walked past Marcus without acknowledgement, heading for the elevator with the slow, defeated gait of someone who had run out of options. The sight of this powerful man, brought so low by circumstances beyond his control, crystallized Marcus's growing resolve. For 8 years, Marcus had watched from the sidelines as others made decisions and shaped the future. He had accepted his invisible status as the price of security and stability. But tonight, watching a company spiral toward destruction, while he possessed the knowledge to save it, invisibility felt less like protection and more like cowardice. That night, Marcus worked with unusual intensity, his mind racing with possibilities and scenarios. The architectural drawings in his apartment represented more than just a building design. They were a bridge between his past as a professional architect and his present as a service worker. Using them would mean reclaiming an identity he had abandoned and risking everything he had built since his business failed. As he cleaned the executive conference room where Blackstone would soon face his board of directors, Marcus imagined what it would be like to present his architectural vision to people with the power to implement it. The fantasy was both thrilling and terrifying, offering the possibility of professional redemption while threatening the security of his current life. Near midnight, as he was cleaning the reception area, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stopped his cleaning cart, pulled out his phone, and called the building's main number. When the automated system answered, he pressed the extension for Blackstone's office, knowing that voicemail would pick up at this late hour. "Mr. Blackstone," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This is Marcus Williams. I work as a janitor in your building, but I'm also a licensed architect with 15 years of professional experience. I believe I have solutions to the problems you're facing with your headquarters project. If you're interested in hearing them, I can be reached at this number." He left his contact information and hung up, immediately questioning the wisdom of what he had just done. The message was now part of the permanent record, a bridge burned that could never be rebuilt. Tomorrow, he would either be dismissed as a delusional janitor or given the opportunity to prove that genius could emerge from the most unexpected places. As Marcus finished his shift in the early morning hours, he carried with him the weight of a decision that could transform his life. In less than 18 hours, he would learn whether his message had been heard and whether someone in power was willing to listen to solutions from an invisible man. The building felt different as he prepared to leave, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Change was coming to Pinnacle Financial, and for the first time in 8 years, Marcus Williams would be part of that change rather than merely observing it from the shadows. Walking home through the pre-dawn streets, Marcus felt both terror and exhilaration coursing through his veins. He had spent 8 years perfecting the art of invisibility, but now that very invisibility was about to be shattered forever. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or humiliation, professional redemption or personal disaster. But for the first time since his architectural firm collapsed 15 years ago, Marcus Williams felt truly alive. Richard Blackstone arrived at his office Friday morning, feeling like a condemned man walking to his execution. In just 2 days, he would face the board of directors with either a miraculous solution or an admission of complete failure. The weight of 30 years of building Pinnacle Financial pressed down on his shoulders as he settled into his leather chair and prepared for another day of impossible phone calls and desperate meetings. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on his door at 8:30 with his usual stack of messages and appointments. But today, she seemed hesitant, uncertain about something that had clearly been troubling her since she arrived at work. "Mr. Blackstone," she said carefully, "there's something unusual in your voicemail from last night." "A message from someone claiming to be an architect. I wasn't sure if it was legitimate or just another person trying to take advantage of our situation." Blackstone's heart sank. The crisis had indeed attracted opportunists and con artists hoping to profit from Pinnacle Financial's desperation. He had received dozens of unsolicited proposals from questionable sources, each promising miraculous solutions for unrealistic fees. "Who is it this time?" he asked wearily. "Another consultant with a miracle cure? Another firm promising to solve everything for a modest 7-figure retainer?" Jennifer hesitated. "Actually, sir, this one is different. The caller says he works as a janitor in our building. He claims to be a licensed architect with 15 years of experience. I know it sounds strange, but something about the message seemed genuine." For a moment, Blackstone was too surprised to respond. A janitor claiming to be an architect? It sounded like the beginning of a cruel joke or an elaborate scam, but Jennifer was an experienced professional with good instincts about people. If she thought the message deserved attention, perhaps it warranted at least a quick dismissal. "Play it for me," Blackstone said, curiosity overcoming his skepticism. Marcus Williams's voice filled the office, calm and professional, despite the unusual circumstances of his call. His words were carefully chosen, his tone respectful but confident. There was no hint of desperation or opportunism, no overselling of miraculous solutions. Instead, there was something that Blackstone had rarely heard in recent weeks: quiet competence. When the message ended, Blackstone sat in silence for several minutes, processing what he had heard. The voice didn't match his mental image of the building's cleaning staff. This man spoke with the vocabulary and cadence of an educated professional, someone comfortable with technical concepts and complex problem-solving. "Jennifer, do we have any employee records for Marcus Williams?" "I'll check right away, sir." While Jennifer researched Marcus's background, Blackstone found himself remembering fragments of late-night encounters with the building's cleaning crew. There was indeed a quiet, middle-aged black man who worked the evening shift, someone Blackstone had passed hundreds of times without really seeing. Could that invisible figure actually possess the expertise that Pinnacle Financial desperately needed? Jennifer returned with a thin personnel file that revealed little beyond basic employment information. Marcus Williams had been hired 8 years ago through the building's contracted cleaning service. His background check had been clean, his work performance consistently rated as excellent. References from previous employers described him as reliable, intelligent, and professional, that there was no mention of architectural training or professional experience outside the cleaning industry. "Sir," Jennifer said carefully, "I took the liberty of doing some quick internet research. There was an architectural firm called Williams Design Associates that operated in the Northeast Corridor from 1995 to 2010. The principal architect was Marcus Williams. The firm designed several notable commercial projects before closing during the economic recession." Blackstone's eyebrows rose. The timeline would match the man in the voicemail message. An architect who had lost his business during the recession might well have ended up in service work, especially if his professional reputation had been damaged by the firm's collapse. It was possible, even probable, that the building's invisible janitor was indeed a trained architect. "Get him on the phone," Blackstone decided. "If he's legitimate, we have nothing to lose by hearing what he has to say. If he's not, we'll know within 5 minutes." The call was answered on the first ring, as if Marcus had been waiting beside his phone all morning. His voice was steady, professional, and slightly nervous in a way that suggested genuine stakes rather than practiced deception. "Mr. Williams, this is Richard Blackstone. I received your message about architectural solutions for our headquarters project. I'll be frank with you, the timing and circumstances are unusual enough to make me skeptical. But I'm curious about what you think you can offer." Marcus's response revealed both the depth of his knowledge and the careful observation he had conducted over years of invisible presence. He described problems with the current architectural proposals that Blackstone hadn't even articulated to himself. He identified inefficiencies in space utilization, missed opportunities for cost savings, and design flaws that would create operational problems years into the future. "I've had the opportunity to study the plans that have been presented," Marcus explained carefully. "My position in the building has given me a unique perspective on how the space is actually used. where traffic flows create problems, and what design elements would best serve your company's culture and operational needs. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, during which Marcus demonstrated a professional vocabulary and analytical framework that left no doubt about his architectural training. His insights were specific, actionable, and directly relevant to the challenges Pinnacle Financial faced. More importantly, his perspective was fresh and unencumbered by the assumptions that had limited other architectural consultations. "Mr. Williams," Blackstone said finally, "I'd like to see your proposal. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" There was a long pause before Marcus replied. "Mr. Blackstone, I should mention that I'm currently scheduled to work my cleaning shift this evening. If we meet this afternoon, my supervisor might have questions about my absence." The reminder of Marcus's dual identity hung in the air between them. Here was a man who mopped floors each night, but possessed the expertise to potentially save a $300 million project. The contradiction challenged every assumption Blackstone had made about talent, opportunity, and the invisible people who worked around him each day. "Mr. Williams, if your proposal has merit, I think we can handle any concerns about your work schedule. Can you be here at 3 o'clock? "Yes, sir. I'll be there." After ending the call, Blackstone sat in his office trying to process the surreal turn his crisis had taken. In less than 6 hours, he would meet with a janitor who might hold the key to his company's survival. The irony was almost overwhelming. After consulting with the most prestigious architectural firms in the country, his salvation might come from a man he had passed in the hallway hundreds of times without acknowledgement. Word of the unusual meeting spread quickly through Pinnacle Financial's executive ranks. By noon, senior staff members were whispering about the CEO's decision to meet with a member of the cleaning crew about architectural matters. Some questioned Blackstone's judgment, wondering if the stress had finally overwhelmed his decision-making abilities. Others were intrigued by the possibility that unconventional thinking might succeed where traditional approaches had failed. At 2:30, Marcus Williams stood outside Pinnacle Financial Tower, wearing a pressed shirt and tie instead of his usual grey uniform. He carried a leather portfolio containing the architectural drawings he had sketched in secret, along with detailed cost analyses and implementation timelines he had prepared throughout the sleepless night following his phone call. The security guards in the lobby looked confused when Marcus asked to be announced to Richard Blackstone's office. They knew him as part of the evening cleaning crew, not as someone who would have legitimate business with the CEO. Phone calls were made, identities were verified, and eventually, Marcus was escorted to the executive elevator that he normally saw only from the outside. The executive floor felt different during business hours, buzzing with activity and charged with the energy of important decisions being made. Secretaries typed urgently at their desks, phones rang constantly, and well-dressed professionals moved purposefully between offices. Marcus had cleaned these same spaces hundreds of times, but experiencing them during peak activity was like seeing a familiar building from an entirely new angle. Jennifer led Marcus to a conference room adjacent to Blackstone's office, a space he had cleaned many times but never occupied as anything other than invisible labor. The mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, surrounded by leather chairs that spoke of power and authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of Manhattan's skyline, the very landscape where Marcus's architectural vision would either triumph or be dismissed as the fantasy of a delusional janitor. At exactly 3 o'clock, Richard Blackstone entered the conference room, followed by Chief Financial Officer David Kim and 2 other senior executives whose faces Marcus recognized from years of observation but had never actually met. The group settled into chairs around the table, creating an impromptu tribunal that would judge whether Marcus's transition from invisible janitor to architectural consultant was legitimate or laughable. Blackstone studied Marcus carefully, clearly trying to reconcile the professional man sitting across from him with the silent figure who had cleaned around his meetings for 8 years. The cognitive dissonance was evident on his face, reflecting the challenge of seeing someone he had never really looked at before. "Mr. Williams," Blackstone began, "I'll admit this is one of the most unusual meetings I've ever conducted. Before we begin, I'd like to understand how someone with architectural training ended up working as a janitor in our building." Marcus had anticipated the question and had prepared an honest but dignified response. He described the collapse of his architectural firm during the 2010 recession, the difficulty of finding new professional opportunities in a devastated industry, and his decision to take cleaning work as a temporary measure that had gradually become permanent. He spoke without self-pity or defensiveness, presenting his story as a series of practical decisions rather than tragic circumstances. "I chose cleaning work because it provided stability during an unstable time," Marcus explained. I never stopped thinking like an architect, but I learned the value of honest labor and the importance of truly understanding how buildings are used by the people who work in them. My years in this building have given me insights that I couldn't have gained any other way. The executives listened without interruption, absorbing Marcus's story and trying to assess the credibility of his claims. His manner was professional but unpretentious, confident without arrogance. Most importantly, he spoke about architecture with the fluency and passion of someone who truly understood the field at its deepest levels. Show us what you've prepared, Blackstone said finally. Marcus opened his portfolio and carefully spread his drawings across the mahogany table, the same surface where he had first discovered the flawed architectural plans that had inspired his secret redesign. The contrast between his current position as presenter and his usual role as silent cleaner was not lost on anyone in the room. What they saw took their breath away. Marcus had created a comprehensive architectural vision that addressed every weakness in the previous proposals while introducing innovations that none of the other firms had even considered. His design was elegant yet practical, inspiring yet cost-effective, bold yet thoroughly grounded in functional reality. The building Marcus had envisioned would rotate 15 degrees from the standard street grid, optimizing natural light exposure and creating dramatic angular views from the interior spaces. The facade would incorporate adaptive shading systems that would reduce energy costs while creating a dynamic external appearance that changed throughout the day. The ground floor would feature a spectacular public atrium that would serve as both a company showcase and a community gathering space, enhancing Pinnacle Financial's reputation while providing valuable rental income from retail and restaurant tenants. But the most impressive aspect of Marcus's proposal was his deep understanding of how Pinnacle Financial actually functioned as a working organization. His floor plans optimized workflow between departments, created flexible spaces that could adapt to changing business needs, and incorporated technology infrastructure that would support the company's growth for decades to come. This wasn't just architectural vision. It was strategic business planning expressed through built environment. As Marcus walked the group through his drawings, explaining design decisions and addressing technical questions, the room grew increasingly quiet. The executives exchanged glances that revealed their growing recognition of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just competent work. It was inspired design that solved problems they hadn't even known they had. David Kinn was the first to break the silence when Marcus finished his presentation. These cost projections, he said, pointing to Marcus's financial analysis, they're lower than any of the other proposals we've seen.
How is that possible? Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the room.
Because I designed the building from the inside out based on actual operational requirements rather than external aesthetics. When you optimize functionality first, you eliminate waste in both construction and ongoing operations. The savings compound over time, making the building not just beautiful but genuinely profitable. The questions continued for another hour, covering structural engineering, environmental systems, regulatory compliance, and construction scheduling. Marcus answered each query with detailed knowledge and practical insight, demonstrating expertise that went far beyond surface-level architectural training. His years of observing how buildings actually functioned had given him a perspective that purely academic architects often lacked. When the formal presentation ended, Blackstone asked the other executives to leave him alone with Marcus for a private conversation. The room grew quiet except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic far below. Mr. Williams, Blackstone said slowly, I owe you an apology. For 8 years you've worked in this building and I never really saw you. I never imagined that someone with your capabilities was right here, watching, learning, and developing solutions to problems I couldn't even properly articulate. Marcus nodded graciously. Mr. Blackstone, I chose to remain invisible because it felt safer than risking rejection or failure again. But watching your company face this crisis, knowing that I might be able to help, made invisibility feel like a form of cowardice. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is the safest one. The two men sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, each processing the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Then Blackstone stood and extended his hand to Marcus, offering not just congratulations but partnership. Mr. Williams, I'd like you to present this proposal to my board of directors on Monday morning. If they approve it, which I believe they will, I want you to lead the architectural team for this project. The question is whether you're willing to take on that responsibility. Marcus felt 30 years of architectural dreams crystallizing into a single moment of opportunity and terror. This was his chance to reclaim his professional identity and create the building that had lived in his imagination for years. But it was also a leap into visibility and vulnerability that would change his life forever.
Mr. Eyre,
Blackstone, Marcus said, standing to meet the offered handshake. I've been preparing for this opportunity my entire life. I'm ready. As they shook hands across the mahogany table where Marcus had once silently emptied trash cans, both men understood that they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. In 60 hours, Marcus would either be dismissed as an imposter or recognized as the visionary architect who saved Pinnacle Financial. But in this moment, suspended between his invisible past and his uncertain future, Marcus Williams finally felt like himself again. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear over Manhattan, the kind of perfect autumn day that made the city's skyline gleam like a promise of infinite possibility. Marcus Williams stood at his apartment window, watching the sun paint golden highlights on the buildings where he had once dreamed of making his mark. Today, 15 years after his architectural career seemingly ended, he would step back into the professional world that had once defined his identity. The weekend had been a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Marcus had spent Saturday refining his presentation, creating detailed cost analyses and implementation timelines that would address every possible question the board might raise. Sunday had been devoted to the more personal challenge of transforming himself from invisible janitor back into confident architect. He had purchased a new suit, gotten his first professional haircut in years, and practiced his presentation until every word flowed naturally. Now, as he prepared for the most important meeting of his life, Marcus felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that reminded him why he had become an architect in the first place. This was the feeling of standing at the edge of creation, of holding a vision that could transform empty space into something meaningful and beautiful. It was the sensation he had missed more than any other during his 8 years of invisible labor. At Pinnacle Financial Tower, Richard Blackstone was facing his own moment of truth. The weekend had brought new pressures as word of Monday's unusual board presentation leaked to the business press. Journalists were asking pointed questions about the CEO's decision to consult with a member of the building's cleaning staff about architectural matters. Some coverage was merely curious, but other articles suggested that desperation had driven Blackstone to grasp at increasingly unlikely straws. "Richard, you understand the stakes here," board chairwoman Margaret Chen said as the directors gathered in the executive conference room. "We've already invested tremendous credibility in this project. If this unconventional approach fails, we'll be seen as a company that's completely lost its way." Blackstone nodded grimly. He had spent the weekend second-guessing his decision to give Marcus this platform. The rational part of his mind catalogued all the ways the presentation could go wrong, all the reasons why trusting a janitor with architectural expertise seemed like professional suicide. But another part of him, the visionary instinct that had built Pinnacle Financial from nothing, insisted that sometimes breakthrough solutions came from the most unexpected directions. "I've seen his work," Blackstone replied. "I've heard his insights. If we dismiss him because of where we found him rather than judging him on his abilities, we're the ones who've lost our way." The board members took their seats around the mahogany table, their faces reflecting various degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and concern. These were successful professionals who had built careers on careful analysis and risk management. The idea of betting their company's future on an unknown architect working as a janitor challenged every principle of conventional business wisdom. At precisely 9 o'clock, Marcus Williams entered the conference room, carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in spaces of power and decision-making. His transformation from invisible service worker to polished professional was so complete that several board members needed a moment to reconcile this figure with their mental image of the building's cleaning staff. Marcus moved to the front of the room and arranged his materials with practiced efficiency, setting up architectural drawings and financial projections with the fluid motions of someone who had given countless presentations to demanding audiences. His manner was respectful, but not deferential, professional, but not intimidating. Most importantly, he projected the kind of calm authority that suggested deep expertise rather than nervous ambition. "Members of the board," Marcus began, his voice clear and steady, "my name is Marcus Williams, and I'm here to present an architectural vision that I believe can transform both Pinnacle Financial's immediate crisis and its long-term prospects. What I'm about to show you represents not just a building design, but a comprehensive strategy for positioning this company at the forefront of modern business innovation." The opening immediately established Marcus as someone who understood the broader context of their challenge. This wasn't just about architecture. It was about competitive positioning, investor confidence, and corporate identity. The board members leaned forward slightly, their skepticism tempered by curiosity about what this unexpected presenter might offer. Marcus began by acknowledging the problems that had brought Pinnacle Financial to this moment of crisis. He discussed the previous architectural proposals not with criticism but with analysis, explaining why designs that looked impressive in isolation had failed to inspire investor confidence or operational enthusiasm. His assessment was thorough, insightful, and demonstrated a deep understanding of both architectural principles and business strategy. The fundamental issue, Marcus explained, is that previous proposals have treated this building as a monument to success rather than a tool for achieving it. They've prioritized external impression over internal function, aesthetic statement over operational efficiency. What I'm proposing is a design that serves your business objectives first, while creating visual impact that supports rather than substitutes for substance. He unveiled his architectural drawings with a showman's sense of timing, revealing a design that took the board's breath away. The building Marcus had envisioned was simultaneously bold and practical, innovative and cost-effective. Every element served multiple purposes, every design decision supported both aesthetic and functional goals. The rotated orientation that had initially seemed like an arbitrary artistic choice revealed itself as a sophisticated response to Manhattan's urban context. The 15-degree angle optimized solar exposure for energy efficiency while creating distinctive sightlines that would make the building instantly recognizable in the city's crowded skyline. The angular geometry that resulted from this rotation created interior spaces with dramatic natural lighting and unique architectural character. The adaptive facade system that Marcus had designed would transform the building's external appearance throughout the day, responding to changing light conditions with automated shading elements that reduced energy costs while creating visual interest. During morning hours, the building would present a crisp, professional face to the business district. By afternoon, the facade would shift to reveal warm, inviting interior spaces that suggested innovation and approachability. Evening lighting would create a dramatic beacon that announced Pinnacle Financial's presence across the Manhattan skyline. But the most impressive aspect of Marcus's proposal was his integration of public and private space in the ground floor design. Rather than creating a fortress-like corporate headquarters, he had envisioned an open atrium that would serve as both company showcase and community gathering place. The space would feature rotating art exhibitions, community events, and high-end retail establishments that would generate rental income, while enhancing Pinnacle Financial's reputation as a progressive, community-minded organization. This public space strategy accomplishes several objectives simultaneously, Marcus explained. It creates positive community relations that support your regulatory and expansion goals. It generates significant rental revenue that improves the building's return on investment. And it demonstrates confidence and transparency that will reassure both clients and investors about your company's stability and vision. The financial projections Marcus presented were as impressive as his architectural vision. His cost estimates were 15% lower than the most competitive previous proposal, achieved through efficient design rather than reduced quality. More importantly, his operational cost analysis showed ongoing savings that would compound over time, making the building genuinely profitable rather than merely prestigious. Board member James Patterson was the first to challenge Marcus's numbers. These energy efficiency claims seem optimistic, he said. How can you be certain that these systems will perform as projected? Marcus had anticipated the question and responded with detailed technical analysis that demonstrated his deep understanding of building engineering systems. He explained how the facade orientation, internal layout, and mechanical systems work together to minimize energy consumption while maximizing occupant comfort. His calculations were thorough, conservative, and supported by references to similar systems in existing buildings. Moreover, Marcus added, I've had the opportunity to observe how this building actually functions during 8 years of working here. I understand where energy is wasted, where operational efficiency breaks down, and what design elements would address these problems. That real-world knowledge informs every aspect of my proposal. The reminder of Marcus's unique perspective created a moment of silence as the board members processed the implications. This man had indeed spent years observing their building's operations from a vantage point that no conventional architect could access. His insights were based not on theoretical knowledge, but on daily experience with how corporate spaces actually function. CFO David Kim raised questions about construction timeline and project management, areas where Marcus's 8-year absence from active architectural practice might create vulnerabilities. Marcus responded by outlining a collaborative approach that would leverage the expertise of established construction firms while maintaining design integrity. He proposed serving as lead architect while partnering with experienced project managers who could handle the complex logistics of Manhattan construction. My role, Marcus explained, would be to ensure that the vision is realized as intended, while relying on proven professionals for implementation expertise. This approach combines innovative design with tested execution, minimizing risk while maximizing creative potential. The questions continued for 2 hours, covering every aspect of the proposal, from structural engineering to financing options. Marcus answered each challenge with detailed knowledge and practical insight, demonstrating expertise that went far beyond what any of the board members had expected. His years of observation had given him an understanding of Pinnacle Financial's culture and operational needs that no outside consultant could match. When the formal presentation ended, board chairwoman Margaret Chen asked Marcus to step outside while the directors deliberated. The wait in the adjacent conference room felt eternal, though it lasted only 30 minutes. Marcus used the time to study the Manhattan skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, imagining how his building would transform the urban landscape while serving the practical needs of the people who would work inside it. When he was called back into the boardroom, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The skeptical tension that had characterized the morning had been replaced by excited energy and collaborative enthusiasm. The board members were leaning forward in their chairs, their body language suggesting engagement rather than judgment. "Mr. Williams," Margaret Chen began, "this board has reviewed hundreds of architectural proposals over the years. We've never encountered one that addressed our needs with such comprehensive understanding and innovative thinking. Your proposal is not just architecturally sound, it's strategically brilliant." The formal vote was unanimous. Marcus Williams was appointed lead architect for Pinnacle Financial's new headquarters project, with full authority to implement his design vision and a budget that reflected the board's complete confidence in his abilities. The decision was accompanied by an immediate consulting agreement that would transition Marcus from janitor to principal architect, ensuring his financial security while the project moved forward. As the meeting concluded, Richard Blackstone approached Marcus for a private conversation. The CEO's relief was visible, but so was his genuine admiration for what had just transpired. "Marcus," Blackstone said, using his first name for the first time, "I want you to know that what happened here today wasn't just about saving a construction project. It was about recognizing talent regardless of where we find it, about looking past assumptions and prejudices that blind us to solutions right in front of our eyes." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Mr. Blackstone, this opportunity means everything to me. But I also hope it means something for your company's culture. There might be other people in this building whose potential you haven't recognized, whose insights could contribute to your success in ways you haven't imagined." The suggestion resonated with Blackstone, who was already thinking about how this experience might change his approach to leadership and talent development. If a janitor could possess architectural expertise that surpassed the most prestigious firms in the city, what other hidden capabilities might exist within his organization? News of the board's decision spread quickly through Pinnacle Financial's offices, generating reactions that ranged from astonishment to admiration. Employees who had passed Marcus in the hallways for years without acknowledgement now saw him as a symbol of possibility and recognition. The story became an instant legend within the company, a reminder that talent and vision could emerge from the most unexpected places. The business press coverage was equally dramatic. Initial skepticism gave way to celebration, as journalists recognized the human interest story that embodied American ideals of opportunity and merit. Marcus became a symbol of hidden potential and second chances, while Pinnacle Financial was praised for its willingness to recognize talent regardless of conventional credentials or social position. Within 6 months, construction began on Marcus Williams's architectural masterpiece. The building that rose from the Manhattan streetscape was everything he had promised: innovative yet practical, beautiful yet functional, profitable yet inspiring. It became an instant landmark, photographed and studied by architects around the world as an example of how visionary design could serve both aesthetic and business objectives. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in Marcus himself. The invisible janitor who had spent 8 years perfecting the art of not being seen had become a recognized leader in his profession, sought after by clients who valued his unique combination of design vision and practical insight. He opened a new architectural firm, Marcus Williams Associates, which quickly became known for projects that balanced innovation with operational efficiency. The success story of Marcus Williams and Pinnacle Financial became a case study taught in business schools and architectural programs, an example of how breakthrough solutions often come from unexpected directions. It was a reminder that genius can be found in any workplace, that observation and experience can be as valuable as formal credentials, and that the courage to step forward with solutions can transform both individual lives and organizational cultures. Years later, as Marcus stood in the shadow of the gleaming tower he had designed, He reflected on the journey that had brought him from invisible janitor to celebrated architect. The building rose 50 stories above the Manhattan streets, its innovative facade shifting and changing with the light, its public spaces buzzing with community activity, its offices housing the thriving business that had dared to see potential where others saw only service labor. The true architect had indeed been found, not through executive search firms or prestigious consultations, but through the simple recognition that talent exists everywhere, waiting for the moment when vision and opportunity finally converge. Sometimes the person you're looking for has been right in front of you all along, quietly observing, quietly knowing, quietly preparing for the day when the truth finally demands to be heard.